self, and that's what we have to do sometimes. We're also very emotional creatures. We have a lot of empathy because of that, because of the mirror neurons in our brains that make us more empathetic.
Hello, all you Courage, Confidence, Connections podcast fans. Thanks for joining us. Your eyes are not deceiving you. There are four additional people on the screen. I have four guests today, and this is our initial panel podcast, something I haven't been doing, but am starting. And I'm honored to have these four wonderful people. I have Bill Allen, I have Tammy Gowen, Gretchen Bergendine, and Donna Chisholm. We're going to be discussing highly sensitive people. If you don't know what that is, by the time this podcast is over, you'll be very well educated. It's going to be a blast. We all have fun. We like to laugh, but we also can talk about some serious subjects. Hang on to your hats because this one's taken off and we're going to go for it. And first of all, Bill, if you would introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Bill Allen. I am an advocate, if you will. I think that's the best descriptor I've come up for myself as an advocate for highly sensitive men. About half of the population of highly sensitive people are men. And one of the things that I like to take a great deal of pride and passion in is helping those men understand this trait and understand what it's about, because it's so important for all highly sensitive people. But I think particularly for highly sensitive men to understand the trait is really packed with a lot of gifts and a lot of, as a lot of people say, superpowers to it. It does have challenges, but we can easily manage those if you understand the trait. So I've written a couple of books. I'm a blogger, a podcaster now as of April 1st. Men with Style with my co-host Randy Grasser. I just launched. Our first podcast was with Elaine Aaron, who is sort of the founder of this feast about highly sensitive people. So that's kind of who I am in a nutshell.
Thank you, Bill. Tammy, would you give us the honor of introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tammy Gowen, and I'm a coach and an energy worker, massage therapist, EFT practitioner. But my main focus is helping everyone, but in particular, highly sensitives, to calm the nervous system and just build all those tools that we tend to need even more so as sensitives in a world that's, too big, too loud, too much, and be able to start HSPs, our nervous system starts amped up higher than typical anyway, and then since we don't have the same filters that everyone has, everything just keeps coming in, barraging constantly, and so it's really easy for us to get to that overwhelmed place. And so I really like to help people to establish that real sustainable self-care practice and really focus on calming that nervous system so that we have more to work with. We can manage more of what comes in. So that's what I really love doing. And I do that through coaching, but also energy work. And then the EFT tapping is really, really effective for moving stuff out that's not effective, and just using that as a tool to self-calm when we have those moments where life is a lot.
Awesome. Donna, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Donna Chisholm, proud HSP, here with all of you other HSPs. I'm just have to name, I'm really excited that we are all in one place, because a lot of the world are not HSPs. And I think the research now is what, 20% of the population around, give or
It
take?
varies, yeah.
And so, I mean, that brings me to what I'm passionate about. I have a coaching practice. I teach mindfulness meditation and self-compassion. But just, I'm really passionate about helping people that feel different than the rest of the world. And that many of us HSPs, with our finely attuned processing and deep emotional expression and things like that we can feel very different than others. And I just want to celebrate our differences and support each other. And but also to name, as an HSP, there's wonderful gifts, but to name the truth and the transparency of like what Tammy said too about the overwhelm and too much information coming in, and meeting our systems, our unique systems, in the best way possible. And I love to do that with others as well.
Awesome,
Thank
Donna.
you.
Thank you. Gretchen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gretchen Bergantine. I am originally from Wisconsin. However, I am based now currently in Huntington Beach, California, and I am the alcohol-free HSP. I'm a certified transformational nutrition and mental wellness coach. I also have my coaching certification in highly sensitive people. And I work with highly sensitive people to help them stop using alcohol to self-soothe or numb out their sensitive nervous system. And I do that through online coaching and through my course, Stop Numbing, Start Living. And I'm really excited to be here with you all.
Well, we're excited to be together. This has been in the works for a few weeks. We have a lot to talk about, and I have no doubt that there'll be no shortage of ideas and thoughts. And who wants to kick us off with a general conversation about HSPs? Because we know we're all in that same category at different levels. So let's go for it.
I can kick it off. I wear my high sensitivity as a badge of honor. I think for me, when I found out I was highly sensitive in 2020, it was the biggest aha moment for me, and everything in my life started to make sense for me. So I embrace the trait. Yes, it certainly has its challenges, but it's about reframing that outlook and how you look at it and how you go about life, and really harness that, like Bill said, what we sometimes refer to as our superpower, and really allow that to work to our advantage.
You guys
Love that. I'd
chime
follow
in?
up on, oh, sorry.
Go
I was just
ahead.
going to follow up on that, and even something that Donna had said too about really, honoring where we're at and in being unique, and recognizing that, oh, okay, yeah, there is a reason that I experience life this way. I'm wired this way, and it's a really great thing. It's not something that needs to be changed or gotten rid of or minimized. But once we can get to that place of really honoring and saying, oh, okay, yeah, this is me. Maybe I can actually celebrate that instead of trying to not be sensitive. Because I hear that from clients a lot. Can you just make me not so sensitive? And, when we're struggling, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes we're like, yeah, that'd be kind of nice right now to not be sensitive. But then we miss out on all the other positive things about that sensitivity. And that would be a real shame. So I like both of those points. Yeah.
Bill, any follow up on some of those thoughts?
Yeah, I would say go see the podcast you did with me if you're watching this, because we went through kind of the whole description of using the acronym that Elaine Aaron, and you'll hear her name a lot, especially if you're talking with highly sensitive people, because she was kind of the person who discovered this trait and packaged it in such a way that it made it accessible to people and understandable. And the acronym she uses is DOES. And these are some of the general characteristics. I mean, you have to realize highly sensitive people are all individual people, that we're not all carbon copies of each other, but we do share some characteristics that go across the trait. One is depth of processing. We're like deep processing folks. We don't deal very much with superficial type stuff. We like to deep dive on topics and information. We have a tendency to be overstimulated and overwhelmed, as Tammy and Donna pointed out, and as Gretchen also mentioned as well. That's probably one of the main things that people see as the biggest challenges dealing with that overstimulation. And I like to think of it like this, is that it's like an aperture on a camera, right? Our filter is a much more open in terms of the amount of data that we take in. And the fact that we deep process it so much is like working a computer, right? It's so much that it can handle before it has to take a break or pause or reboot itself. And that's what we have to do sometimes. We're also very emotional creatures. We have a lot of empathy because of that, because of the mirror neurons in our brains that make us more empathetic and aware of what other people are feeling and thinking. And then finally, we have this great I think probably one of the greatest traits of highly sensitive people is this ability to sense subtle information within the environment. And I think that's the thing that ties into those four different characteristics, but that ties in with what Elaine Aron talks about as this trait is an evolutionary trait. It's a kind of a trait that is built in, baked in to a certain part of the human population. And there's survival things that go along with that that have made us uh, survive throughout history. So it's not a weakness. It's not something that is to be shunned or rejected, but managed and dealt with. Because it is, like I said, it can be very taxing if you don't know what you're doing with it. So anyway, to make a long story short, I it is a gift to be able to have this trait, but it's something that you need to understand if you're just finding out about the trait itself. And that education you'll get from people like this panel that you have here, people that are working with people on a day-to-day basis on how to manage some of the challenges and how to amplify and really take advantage of some of the gifts that are coming with this trait.
I love that. I have to chime in. Just, yeah, again, for all the listeners, that the word being highly sensitive, thank goodness it's really shifting, because I can name, at least for myself, I believe all of you, that it really is an absolute gift. And if we learn and can accept, the depth of processing, the ability to feel emotions in a big way. And I want to say, for me in my practice, and especially with teaching mindfulness and self-compassion, is a lot of work on feeling emotions in the body through the nervous system. I know, Tammy, you mentioned that as well. But the importance of living a life that we are alive. Like, so HSPs, and again, my experience of HSPs, because I don't want to make any assumptions of others, and that just what Bill said, we're all, have this characteristics, but the presentation and the expression can be a little different. But just to name, for me, I spent much of my life not being so afraid to feel hard things. And I ran away from myself for a lot of that time. And now I use the term welcome everything. Welcome, as an HSP, I feel things big, and I celebrate it. I'm alive. It's aliveness to me. And whether that's joy or sadness, whatever it is, it's a reminder to me, like, wow, I can feel everything. And the gift of being an HSP, I mean, we can really feel that. I mean, even like smelling a flower, our senses, all of these things, nature, like what we are attuning to is like an incredibly deep experience. So it's like, yeah, I just want to name that the flux of emotions, the deep processing, to me, I just attribute that and celebrate being alive. And like Gretchen, hearing from you with your focus on people numbing out with alcohol, right? I mean, that's needing to learn how to be with our emotions and support them without numbing out, and, not being afraid, and practicing and having the capacity to, to really recognize that HSPs, we do feel things bigger. But to me, it's like, it's more living, it's being more alive. So it's just another, I don't know, it's another outlet that I like to mention because I think it's important.
I have a question I want to put on the table to see you've all got a story as far as how you came across this being highly sensitive and how it became an interest in your life and discovering how you were highly sensitive. I never heard of it until I met Bill, and we started having conversations, and of course the book. And that's the point. I started to understand a little bit more about myself and others. Now, let's put that out for all of you to tell your story, or whatever part of it challenges however you came across discovering you were a highly sensitive person and began to accept it.
This is always my favorite question to ask highly sensitive people because I think it's a really great, almost pivotal moment in our lives where we start to understand ourselves and put the pieces of the puzzle together, at least for me in my experience. But I found out, like I said, I was highly sensitive in 2020 when my mom came out to visit me in California. And she was, we were talking about how we're so sensitive and how my grandma is sensitive, my son is sensitive, my brother's sensitive. And she went back to Wisconsin, and on her YouTube, as our phones have a tendency to listen to us, she saw a TED Talk video pop up on the trait of high sensitivity. And she immediately sent it to me. And some of you know my story here, but it wasn't until a year later that I connected the dots that the day that my mom sent me that TED Talk, it was a Sunday morning at around 9 or 10 a.m., and I happened to be drinking a beer. And when I put those two pieces of the puzzle together, I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I've been doing. I've been numbing my sensitivity with alcohol, and it wasn't it wasn't super rare that I would drink on a Sunday morning, but it was a little alarming, right? At Sunday morning, I don't know if I was nursing a hangover or getting Sunday fun day started or maybe both, but it really made sense to me at that moment. And that's when I thought, okay, I've got to do something about this. This is my story, and people need to know about it. We need to come together. We need to talk about our high sensitivity and how it's been impacting us both negative and positive. And like I said, I've turned my whole life around with giving up alcohol. I just celebrated 1,000 days alcohol free yesterday, and I embrace high sensitivity, and that's my story.
Who's
Awesome.
next?
Well, I can go. Mine kind of addresses the, sometimes communication and just relationships in general can be a bit of a challenge for us because of all the things everyone's been talking about. So my personal story was I had a business partner at the time and a friend, and we had an event that we all went to, and I actually showed up to join them. And the stuff that happened was just awful for me. I just thought I was being very discounted, not supported at all, disrespected. And so I, left in a huff and couldn't understand what was going on. And then talking with especially my business partner and friend at the time and explaining, like, I don't understand what was just going on. And her view was it's past. It's not a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. You're making, too much of it. And I couldn't let it go because I wasn't getting my point across. And it was really challenging for our relationship in the business and in our friendship. And I just kept wanting for her to understand and see my point of view, see why it was so difficult for me. And she's like, just move on, just let it go. So one of my friends that was supporting me contacted me and said, hey, you should check this thing out online. And I pulled up the 16 traits of highly sensitive people. I'd never heard of such a thing. I have a master's in counseling. There was nothing in my program back in the day of sensitivity at all. This was totally new. And I'm looking at those statements and I'm going, yep. Okay. It's like all but two of those were, ding, ding, ding. And then I had that aha moment, like Gretchen, you were talking about. I sat back and went, wow, okay. It's not just me. There's an inventory online. Someone created this thing. And I was able to, sit with that for a while, looking at all those individual responses or statements and go, oh, when that happens. And then when I have this experience and I feel this way, and it all came together to realize there's a reason why I see life and experience life and feel this way. And so it was that part of we like to be unique, but feeling like I'm the only one and everyone else is different and no one understands me. And that took a 180 in that moment, going, oh, there's a lot of people out here apparently who would understand what I'm going through. And that was just such a powerful moment. And then of course, being the HSP, I took a deep dive into what is this high sensitivity thing? And that's where, that led me to not only understanding myself more, and using that in working with my clients, because it's like, oh, okay, this is why I can pick up on this, or I can understand this, or and enhancing those abilities, but then also recognizing that a lot of my clients were also sensitive. And then I understood that and could help them see the, oh, wow, this is me. And there's a reason, and it's all okay. And actually can even be really good. So that's my story.
Donna, why don't you go? Because I am the one person different than the rest of you. So I'll wrap it up as a perspective from a man's point of view.
But this is diversity, Bill.
Absolutely.
Equality, diversity. Sure, I can go. I didn't have like a one experience or anything like that. Like as I was listening to Gretchen and you, Tammy, that like I didn't have like a aha moment. I was just reflecting on that, listening to your stories. And I believe that mine, I will say that, I certainly had those experiences. I grew up in a family of five. I was one of five. And I had a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of healing from that trauma. So I think healing of my own trauma helped me see my HSP traits. I also something else that I believe is common with HSP people. We're very self-aware and very motivated to heal and integrate and make a difference. And so like I often would wonder, why am I the only one out of five siblings that's actually, able or willing or desiring to heal from our childhood trauma? And I think a part of that is my HSP-ness with that. And I look at that as like I call it my soul contract. It helps me understand why I look at my siblings and I'm like, wait a minute, did we grow up in the same? I know we're all different ages, but wait, were you there? I was there. Did this, but why some of us are more more intentional and motivated to heal and grow and make a difference and be more self-aware and reflect and feel. And I don't know, I would say that that's a piece of my awareness of being an HSP.
Mhm.
Also, I even from a young age, I remember, I swear I was like all my friends' therapist. Like, well, obviously I wasn't a therapist, but all your friends came to you with, did any the rest of you have that
They still
experience?
do. They still do.
Right? Like they just kind of find you and I don't know. So that and yeah, I think like just one other thing about an HSP bringing in the quality of friendships. Like the value of connection and friendships for me from a very young age was, the most important thing ever. And I feel like HSPs, we tend to be really good friends. We are loyal. We are, um, you can count on us. We're real. We're authentic. We know how to presence and listen. And so all those empathy skills. And so I guess that's another way that I saw that HSP-ness. So there wasn't any one aha moment. It was just a mix. Yeah. You're up, Bill.
Okay. The only male on the panel. Well, I can tell you this for a fact that high sensitivity, and in fact, on the podcast, we did a interview with Dr. Michael Plus, who is one of the leading researchers on high sensitivity. And we asked him the question, is there really any research out there that delineates the experience that highly sensitive men have versus highly sensitive women? And unfortunately, he came back and said, well, they haven't really gotten to that point of trying to delineate it by gender. But his own personal thoughts were that probably not. If from a genetic and from a neurological and physiological perspective, it probably is very similar, if not the same, kind of experience-wise. What really is different is the cultural aspects that go behind sensitivity. So you have, a cultural expectation for men, and this is what I grew up in the South. Janice and I grew up very close. We both grew up in the Carolinas,
Mhm.
and I was socialized to believe that being sensitive was a very bad thing for a man. If you were told that you were too sensitive, too emotional, you felt too big, like Donna was talking about big emotions, which is things that we all experience as highly sensitive people. You were told that that was not to be done. You would not be a man if you did that kind of thing. So I labored under that kind of instruction and orientation for almost my entire adult life. And it wasn't until probably around 2005 or six, somewhere around there, that I picked up Dr. Aaron's book. And all of that stuff. Now I knew growing up and throughout all that time that I was different. I was different than my peers. Most of my friends didn't feel the same way I did about things. I suppressed a lot of how I felt simply just so I could fit in and not be shamed or ostracized in any way, shape, or form. But when I read her book, it was like suddenly, yeah, this explains a lot of stuff about my life and how I feel and what was going on inside of me throughout all that period of time. But you know what? Even then, and that was probably somewhere in my early 50s or so when I read her book, even then, I could not accept that. It was like, no, you can't be a sensitive man because all that programming rolling around in my head was saying sensitive is bad. It's not a good thing to be, especially if you're a man. So it took me about 10 years. I wrapped up my career in information technology at a big bank, retired, and I sat down and I started writing blogs about this because I was curious about it. And the questions I had were different than most of the blogs I had seen about this. So it became kind of a labor of love for me. And that blog led to books and all that research that I did, everything that I did to educate myself, get involved, talk to people, read books, all started to make sense after a while. And it was at that point, probably about 2016 or 17, that I started to realize I'm okay with this, you know. Um, and it's because of the education and learning about the trait, I realized that it's natural. There's nothing abnormal about it. It's not a disorder, and you can be proud of what you are. So from that point on is sort of my second career as this advocate for highly sensitive men, because I think highly sensitive men really do struggle with this idea of being called sensitive. And so my task people that work alongside me and other people that are working to help men understand this are trying to get men to shift the way they think to seeing this as we all have talked about. It's a gift. It gives you awareness that a lot of people don't have, sensory awareness, environmental awareness, emotional awareness that a lot of people miss.
Mhm.
And that can be used as a positive thing. It does have to be managed, and we all know that. But the idea is that once I think the biggest hurdle is to get past that, and it was for me to embrace the trait. And that's what I say, to try to get men to embrace the trait and educate themselves about how they can use it.
That's fantastic. My, I didn't understand it till I was doing a little research and talking to Bill because I was doing it on behalf of someone else. And I just ever been there, done that. And so I discovered that I had a lot of the same traits. And that it started to explain, it still does a lot of things for me too. I do have a next question about challenges on this journey, and Bill just addressed a lot of his. Are there any other challenges that you guys would like to talk about that might relate to our audience of this is not abnormal? You're going to bump into this. And I know, Bill, you're being the only male in this group and quite outnumbered, and your challenges you did express, but are there any practical challenge related thoughts that you guys have?
I would say for me, educating other people about the trait of high sensitivity, because we are often very misunderstood.
Mhm.
And you don't know what you don't know, right? So I have made it my personal mission to raise awareness of the trait of high sensitivity while also breaking the stigma of sensitivity in general. So I think educating others on it and sharing, I always share, like what Bill said earlier, the acronym DOES, and having others that are non-HSPs understand that we are different. So I think for me in my life, I always knew I was different. I always knew you know, very free spirit, very independent, beat to my own drum. Everyone goes this way, I go that way. And I just always assumed that that was part of, being misunderstood, was that I was just this free spirit and kind of did what I want. But once I learned about the trait of high sensitivity and learned all of the reasons why we are the way that we are, it made sense to me why other people would not know. And it's not really talked about as much as it could be. And I know it's gaining traction now with TikToks and Instagram and books and things like that. But the trait of high sensitivity, the world needs us right now, and it's our job, or at least it's my personal job, to make it that mission of raising awareness so that the other 70-80% of the population can understand us, so we can do life together. Because I do find myself gravitating towards HSPs. I would say most of my deep friendships are with HSPs, and I don't want to isolate myself, but I also know that that's sometimes where I feel safest because I feel understood.
Awesome. Who else has some words of wisdom for someone listening that might be facing challenges that you've gone through?
Well, I think one thing that's really important for HSPs is to be able to talk about, acknowledge, and work through setting boundaries and acknowledging the piece of, we tend to not want to step on any toes, not want anyone else's feelings to be hurt, not want anyone to be upset with us. And so there can be a real tendency of not speaking our truth because of, like there's so many parameters, right? There's so many potential results of speaking up.
Yes.
And I know that that's a real common thread, with all of my clients, whether that's looking at something about leadership or working in a personal relationship, or something where they're like, well, yeah, I know all these things, but they don't understand me, like you were talking about, Gretchen. But that piece of being able to take that step personally and share with other people and say, hey, this is my reality, and engage in that conversation of, so what's it like for you? That's one of the biggest questions, the most important questions I think that we can ask to support someone is, what's this like for you?
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing this is what it's like for me, and I can share that. What's it like for you? And then let's have that discussion. Because a lot of times that doesn't happen, and there's all this stuff in our head, and we're just kind of making assumptions of why people are doing what they're doing, or why they're not listening in the right way for us, or why they're getting, or why there's this misperception or misunderstanding. And so then we stay back in here instead of saying, oh, well, let me share what this is like for me, and then you can let me know what it's like for you, and we can talk about how different that is. But celebrate this is the way that it is for me, and it's all good. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
But that automatic piece in our culture, especially for men, is to see that sensitivity as, oh, that's something you need to take care of, get that, figure that out, and then come back, get back with me. Like you got to take care of that. That's an unfortunate trait, and you're gonna need to work through that, and then we can have the conversation or the experience that we want, rather than having that meeting in the middle. But that piece of being able to share that personally, not, I mean, for us as advocates, for sure, getting that word out there, and then helping individual people that are sensitive to be able to say, I need to share my experience with everybody so that I can get that support. Because, we don't get support if we don't ask for it. And that can be really challenging to put ourselves out there and ask, but being able to do that in a way that's heard, and then we get that support, I think is just crucial.
Absolutely. I agree. Donna, Bill, either of you have any additional?
Well, I would say one other thing, and this is kind of tagging on to what Tammy was saying. Aside from overstimulation, which probably is one of the biggest things that highly sensitive people have to deal with, setting boundaries is another one, right? And we talk about people pleasing and wanting to do things. We very seldom advocate for ourselves and our needs. In fact, Jacqueline Strickland, at one of her gatherings, shared this idea that um, we should not box ourselves in with the seeking approval and always looking for, something to please other people, but to recognize that we have needs. And I think for highly sensitive people, a lot of times the liberation point becomes when they realize that they can advocate for themselves, that they do have special needs that are different sometimes than other people. And that could include work environment, the place that you work and you spend most of your time. It could be relationships, it could be friendships, it could be how you live your life, how you choose to live your life, how much you allow in and how much you give out. Um, all those things are important, but it's a kind of a boundary system that you have to set up to say, I have to take care of me too. And that's, I think, one of the challenges that a lot of highly sensitive people have struggled with, maybe throughout their entire lives, is because they haven't recognized that they have rights too. They have a right to have a happy life, and they need to define it in a way that best suits them.
Well said. I agree. And the boundaries are essential because I have been in many situations where I didn't have any, didn't know what they were. And I will say this, when you start putting boundaries in place, you will have some unhappy campers nearby.
Mhm.
Do not care for your boundaries. But one of my personality profiles I did many years ago in counseling, she utilized one that showed what I guess it's what type of dog you were, and personality wise. And I was a golden retriever, and we all know what those are. And I was just wanting to make everybody happy.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Oh,
So I should have picked up on that clue, but I didn't know what a highly sensitive person was. But I knew I was a people pleaser, and I was a little golden retriever. Hey Donna, what are your
that's sweet. Well, I mean, just to name from a day-to-day standpoint that the overwhelm with sensory overload, like I think that's we have to support ourselves. Our lifestyle can be very different than others. And that could be, I need a lot more sleep than most overall, have my whole life, right? And that makes sense. I mean, like Bill, what you were saying, the amount of information that we're taking in and the depth of the processing, of course we need more sleep. So, and just I don't like loud crowds. I don't like overhead lights. This has been a huge, really helpful thing for other HSPs to wear a hat, literally wear a hat inside. I do that a lot. If I go to places and I know there's going to be those overhead lights, I just wear a hat and it really, like my energy is not as drained as quick that way. So just honoring those and also naming, they can be inconvenient. Like you drive your own car if you're going out with people because their level of stimulation is different. And you were like, hey, all right, guys, I'll see you. Let's get together at 4 and be home by 9. Perfect. So just honoring those differences and not over explaining that, like not if those are not our people. If they're not really understanding that we don't like loud, crowded places with bright lights, we don't want to be questioned on how much sleep we need. Like it's like we really want those people that can, respect that lifestyle difference. And it is a lifestyle difference. But in order for us to live that high quality life and be, who we are, we really need to address that daily. Like if I don't get out in nature every day, I am dysregulated. So like nature and sleep are probably the two greatest, staples for me. And then the other challenge I would say is that, and I don't remember who mentioned this, but the superficial, friendships, relationships, and my coaching is a relational coaching practice, is that HSPs, we don't have, I mean, I have to say that I'm probably down to like 0 or less for tolerance for superficial conversation. So we are like looking for meaning, looking for connection, and it just isn't fair to us in how we're wired to be asked to go into superficial conversations and relationships. So, with that being said, there's a lot of people in the world in our everyday lives that they don't have the skill or the capacity or the awareness of a little bit more depth. And so it can be isolating. I mean, I have let go of a lot of friendships in my life, and it's as an HSP that, it's painful, very painful, but it's dishonoring of myself if I am dimming down vibrationally. I cannot do, here it being in a conversation with somebody talking about someone else in a negative way. Like my whole body right now is going whoop whoop. Like I can't. I'm like, no, this is so against who I am as a soul and a human being. So, but just to name that, friend, there's challenges in friendships and challenges in relationships, and really encourage all of our listeners to, when we abandon ourselves to try to fit in or belong, we really suffer. Our nervous system gets hijacked and we just don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel fulfilled in relationships that have a level of depth and transparency and vulnerability and realness. But the reality is that I won't abandon myself for that, but I will name that there can be more loneliness and more isolation, with choosing to not abandon myself and seek those relationships that is not there.
Good points. One thing you said is something about having to explain ourselves. And for years, until recently, I always felt that need to, I did it subconsciously. Somebody would ask me to go somewhere or do something or whatever that might be. And I would just naturally say, I can't because, and start explaining myself instead of just saying, no, I can't do that. I just stopped doing that. And I had a client not too long ago that was going through that scenario. And I said, you don't owe that person an explanation. And she kind of got that, oh, okay, it's okay to say no. And that's part of the boundaries, but it's okay. It's okay to be who you are. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set standards for yourself. Because I know, like you, Donna, I don't get out in nature that much, but I love my time alone to read. And I want to point out a book that don't think I've told any of you about, and our audience will benefit from this too. It's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. It is, I'm halfway through. I think I read half of it in a couple of hours last weekend. It is so wonderful because most of us we're creatives at some level, write, whatever we do. I write, I've got other creative talents, but it talks about what we're discussing here. That gentleman that wrote it has to be a highly sensitive person, but it talks about being yourself. And if you're trying to follow someone else's standards and it's not working, then go the opposite way. Do it differently. And that's what we're talking about. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to express yourself, but also know that it needs to be a safe place. that we all, highly sensitives, and you guys are the experts on that. But I know for me, I didn't choose wisely on a safe place for a long time. And I'd kind of like to, we're probably on the backside of this in the next 10, 15 minutes. We'll wrap it up. But I'd like to talk about that topic of having a safe place, what that means in your lives, and what you would say to our audience on that note.
That's a very important thing with a lot of highly sensitive men that I talk to and work with is having a safe place. I do an HSP men's online group, and we get together about once a month, and they're from all over the world. And one of the things that because the people who come vary from month to month, so we have a different group every time. We do have specialized groups for smaller groups of men who get to know each other more intimately, but this is a big tent meeting, and they come in, and having a place where you can be vulnerable and where you can share what you're feeling. Now, sometimes in an in-person meeting, if you're with a group of HSPs, because there's physical presence, sometimes you can immediately just latch on and say, these are my peeps. I feel good about it. I'm comfortable, and you don't have to say a whole lot. But in an online meeting, there's a lot that's missed. You miss some of the physical energy that's there too. So having that safe place for these men to come in and talk, to be open, to know that they're not going to get shamed about feeling something, or they're going to feel like they're accepted for who they are. Those are critical key things, especially for people, highly sensitive people that have just discovered that they are highly sensitive. They're kind of getting their sea legs, after or land legs, whatever it is, that to kind of get themselves oriented. But having a safe place to feel you can be yourself. Again, it ties back with it. What everybody really has said is this authenticity. As Donna was saying, you get outside of being authentic and you're a highly sensitive person, that's going to be a problem. And it will manifest itself in physical illnesses. It will manifest itself in addictions. It will manifest in a lot of coping strategies that don't work and aren't good. But the minute you start realizing that you can be who you are, that authentic, true you, it's liberating. It's amazing. And that's being in that safe space. So I think, especially coming from a point of view of a man and having opportunities to be in a safe space is really critical for us. And these are things that I would say to all HSPs. Do not ignore what your intuition is telling you, what your soul is telling, what your heart is telling you, because it will tell you, it leads you the right way.
Awesome.
I like that, Bill.
Thank you.
Well, and I would follow up with saying, in terms of relationships, it's important to have that safety place. So maybe that's only one or two people in your little inner circle that you feel like you can really just be yourself. It's really important to embrace that and make that your focus and not worry about, I think you were talking about that, Gretchen, is like there's a whole group of people. It's like, yeah, I could spend time with these folks and make them my people, but I'm not going to be me when I'm with them, because there's that bit of limitation there. But in terms of having an outlet, whether it's coaching or counseling or some kind of mentoring, something where someone can have that experience of understanding. And the reason I decided to go the direction of really working specifically with sensitives was hearing from people saying, oh, I've had coaching, I've had counseling in the past, and I didn't feel like I could get beyond a certain point because I wasn't understood. And so, if even in those particular situations where you're supposed to be with someone who's there for you and supporting and guiding and listening, right? That's that big piece of listening. And yet they're getting messages like, oh yeah, you'll just, need to learn how to let that go, or just whatever those messages were. That doesn't feel safe, right? If we're told, if we're in an environment that we're told we need to be different in some way at some level, that's not going to feel safe. So honoring that intuitive piece, like you were talking about, Bill, of okay, so I'm in this counseling situation or this with this coach or whatever, and it's supposed to be great, and I'm supposed to be learning all this stuff, and yet I don't feel like I can be me, or I don't feel relaxed and safe. Being able to say, this is one of those boundaries I need to set. This is not working for me. I can go and look somewhere else until I find that situation where I say, oh, I can be totally me right now and get the most out of this situation. Because one of the things about sensitives also on the positive side is that we tend to get more out of coaching, counseling, guidance, anything that's positive, that's helping, whether it's healthcare or whatever, because we can take all that stuff in and it can be really impactful. But it's only going to happen if we're aware and we're honest with who we are as sensitives, and allow ourselves to say, oh yes, this works, this isn't, this is where I'm safe and I can go forward.
And for me, I'm very intentional about creating a safe space for me in my daily life. I'm all about nervous system regulation and nurturing my nervous system. So I am very, Bill, you can probably speak to this because you follow me on Instagram, but I'm very intentional about, making sure I get enough protein every morning, making sure I get exercise or movement every day, making sure I'm out in nature, because I know that if I don't get those needs met, it's not going to be good. So that's my safe space. I need a lot of downtime. I'm actually an ambivert. I'm an equal part extrovert and introvert, but I really like my alone time. And knowing those needs, I take an Epsom salt bubble bath every night. I have my routine. I read, I meditate, I do all the things. And like Tammy, you were saying, we have that what's called vantage sensitivity, where we can come out on the other side after healing and coaching and nurturing ourselves and what we need, and then thrive in that post-traumatic growth. So I'm very intentional. Obviously, I'm a coach, but I know for me what works and what doesn't, and I have a sacred space every day of my life.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
What wise people we are, huh?
We are wise.
Totally wise. Well, and for me, just to, name that, safety, of course, safety can mean so many different things. And from what everybody's been sharing, like, nurturing our nervous system, getting time alone, getting time in nature, making sure we have protein, sleep. I mean, all of these things are really important on a daily basis to, to tend to this like fine-tuned instrument nervous system. I mean, we are like, I don't have a musical background, but it is a fine-tuned system.
Yeah.
And we need to care for it that way. But also to link in the safety for, HSPs that are high empathy and are, people pleasing and our desire for depth of connection, that I want to name that it's the importance of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. That safety, it does not always feel comfortable because we are learning how to not abandon ourselves and not people please, or not go into a situation that doesn't fit our needs. And just so getting to know our own unique expression. Again, that's the nervous system stuff coming in. What's going on in my body right now? Is this where I need to be? But I that term safety, I just want to name that part of that learning for us. I spoke about the isolation and challenges in relationships because we desire depth of connection and we don't have a tolerance for drama or superficial connection, that we can train that safe place by learning. We can create that safe place within ourselves by learning how to be with the discomfort of those changes.
Right. Yeah. It is a transition and a change. It's something we have to embrace. And I frequently write about change and been through a lot of it, as I know you guys have. before we wrap it up, any final thoughts from any of you, all of you,
I
whoever?
just wanted to throw out something, and it's interesting that you brought up there being an ambivert, Gretchen, because people that are not as familiar with sensitivity as we're talking about all this, it might seem like, everyone that's sensitive is introverted,
Right.
but there is that percentage, 30% or so or whatever, that are extroverted. And I know that poses its own extra little challenge, because there's people that are like putting themselves out there and wanting a little bit more activity, engagement, whatever. And yet at the same time, they're needing the downtime, the go within time, and trying to balance that and acknowledge and honor that. So I just want to throw that out there, because that is a very real factor. And I mean, I've had clients where they're like, I don't know what to do with this. I want to do all these things. And then I'm hearing that it's good to be able to say no and not overschedule and whatever, but then I really want to do these things and then I crash, so being able to have that balance of, oh yeah, I can, and I'm an introvert, so I can't speak to being in that extroverted realm, but having that urge to just really be putting yourself out there, but knowing it's like, okay, I have to have limits on this so that I don't crash and burn, because I know that I also need, as you were talking about, Gretchen, like every night, this is my little thing before I go to bed so that I'm ready for the next day. So it is possible to be highly sensing, and I like that term better than sensitive, actually, just because of the kind of the connotation with the term sensitive. But just having that awareness and saying, okay, I need to make sure that I do the self-care stuff, even though I'm also an extrovert, and it can happen. I mean, both of those are possible as a sensitive.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Very good point. Any final words of wisdom or thoughts, Bill, Donna?
Well, we're all highly sensitive people. That's one thing. You get a room full of highly sensitive people. We can talk about this trait forever, but there's still a lot to be learned about this trait. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done, things that they haven't even thought about doing yet. And I think the more we learn about the trait through studies and through research that's done, and perhaps people writing books who coach and are therapists and are learning directly with their clients, the body of knowledge will grow on this topic, and we'll know more and more as time goes on. The good thing about it is it is now, I think, accepted in the psychology community. It's not something that's sort of well, we're not sure where that fits or whatever. It's actually, they've been doing a lot more research in that area. So again, that's a good thing. And hopefully, as we go along and pay attention to what's coming out, if you're a highly sensitive person, watch podcasts like this one. You'll learn about it, and as we all learn as the research grows. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that bears fruit on.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I just would like to say, to the listeners, is that you are taking in the five of us that have been through a lot of challenges to come to a place of acceptance and empowerment of being an HSP. And you are just know there are so many resources available. Obviously, Janice, thank you for this podcast is one. The rest of us have our own practices, but I just to whatever I just like to hear that younger people, like if I was my high school age self and I knew what I knew now, and obviously that's developmental, but I just want to name for listeners that if you are feeling different and alone and isolated, that there really is, you are not alone. And I know the impression that you're getting is all of us here, we're sounding so worldly, and which we are, but we've had the experience of coming to this place, and it's never too late. And so just please, reach out and get the support that you need. And boy, are we HSPs, are we ever needed at this time more than ever.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate you guys. We're going to wrap it up. We've got about an hour in, and I want to remind our audience that all four of these wonderful people have individual podcasts on my website as well as YouTube. You can listen and watch from each of them on not a different perspective, but on an individual podcast. I love bringing a group of people together on a topic because we get a lot more interaction and information as it comes out. But I want to thank you, Donna, Bill, Tammy, and Gretchen for joining me on this premiere of my panel podcast. I called them guinea pigs before we started recording, but you're really not. You're professional.
Are we your first panel? Your very first panel?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
What a perfect choice.
Well, we
A little
bring.
bias.
Oh yeah, very, very glad to have you guys on here. All the information to reach them is available on their individual podcast, as well as we'll have some of that on the podcast of this one that being recorded. And I think the second one today, my mouth is starting to go. Anyway, thank you to our audience. I'm Janice Debo, your host for Courage, Confidence, Connections podcast. And stay tuned. There are more podcasts to come and more panels to come. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.